Well, hello guys, I hope you're doing well, and for this week's video, I wanted to talk about a subject that I find fascinating and I guess slightly controversial still, which is our educational system, and also just kind of give my own experience and background and why I chose not to go to university. So the first point that I would like to make before I get into my personal story is that I am in no way bashing everyone going to university. Obviously, there are so many careers that you just kind of have to go to university to actually pursue, and second of all, some people absolutely love the experience. They say it was the happiest times of their lives, they made great friends, they learned so much. So in no way is this bashing the experience for everyone, but it's kind of just giving an alternative sort of perspective, because the issue that I have with the whole system is that there's just so much fear mongering when it comes to not going to university, and they really try and catch you at that vulnerable sort of age where it's like you're just stepping out to be an adult, but you haven't had really any experience in the real world, and here you are shelling out $50,000 for a 4-year degree. So unless it's really something that you're passionate about and kind of have to do in terms of your career and what you want to do, then maybe it's something that you should think twice about. So on that note, I am going to jump into my own story when it comes to my education, and hopefully some of you guys can relate to it. So as some of you guys know, I moved to Canada when I was about 5 years old from Kiev, Ukraine, and it was definitely a bit of an adjustment period the first couple of years, but I think after the hell of play school and kindergarten, grade 1 was actually fantastic because I did make some friends and I was actually really excelling in school. I think I actually had a really good upper hand because my grandma and my great-grandma in Ukraine pretty much brought me up while my mom had to work every day, and they taught me how to read and how to write and do basic sort of math, I think at the age of 3 or so. So by the time that I was in grade 1 and was 7 or 8 or however old you are in that grade, even though it was in English, those wheels had already started turning, and it wasn't so difficult for me to pick up all of these new things, and I already basically knew what all the kids there were just starting to learn. So once I got into grade 2, I was definitely cruising through my schoolwork, and I would come home every day complaining to my dad that the books we're reading are for babies and everything's so easy. And my dad pretty much took that as I'm not being challenged, and he felt the need to do something about it, so he went and talked to the principal and asked him to skip me a grade. Now this was in small town Saskatchewan where things like that just don't happen, so there was a lot of resistance on the school board to even allow me to do something like that because they thought it would interfere with my psychological sort of adaptation or something into grade 3, but my dad ended up being super stubborn and pretty much forced them to give me a test that would prove that I could do the work of what they were doing in grade 3, and I ended up being able to pass it, and then they pretty much had to skip me. So thankfully the experience was actually super positive and definitely the best thing we could have done, because not only did I get to graduate a year earlier, but I really liked my new grade and they took me in really well. And it was actually really nice because I did get knocked off my pedestal going into grade 3 for the first half, I would say, where I was definitely not even close to being the smartest person in the room. I was average at best, and it was a really big challenge for me to kind of have to step up my elementary school game to not only fit in with kids who were older than me, and a year in elementary school is a really big deal, but to also keep up with the schoolwork. So it was a really great challenge, and I'm really glad that ended up happening. I think it was around grade 7 where things really started to change for me, not only in school, but obviously in my personal life as well. I had a lot of things kind of happen at home, and just with me, evolving as a human being. And I was very, very different once grade 7 came around. And the other thing that happened school-wise was that for some reason I started to get really intense anxiety just having to be there all the time, and I started to get really frustrated with what we were doing. So it also just happened to be the time where I started my skipping school career. In many ways, I still really enjoyed school. I loved going to be with my friends, and I liked a lot of my teachers, and quite a few of my classes I really liked. Obviously, I tended towards the more creative subjects like English and band and drama and all of that kind of stuff. When it came to the sciences or math, yes, I could get an A in it. I could, get through it and not completely hate it. I'm a very impatient person, and I like to get things done as simply and as effectively as possible. And it was already around grade 7 and 8 where I had all these ideas of the kind of creative career that I possibly wanted to have. And I just felt like we were wasting so much time in school, learning things that I could, learn in half the time. And then second of all, like I mentioned before, they weren't really practical things. It's like, what am I even going to do with this knowledge? Like, why am I sitting here learning this? I'm never going to use it other than writing the test. I'd just be like praying for the hour that, school would be done and I could go home and work on the things that I wanted to work on. So it got to be really frustrating. So that was pretty much the start of Alina's acting career, where I would pretty much just play sick. So whenever I felt like not being in school, I would just leave because of that. And thankfully, my teachers were super understanding about it, because at the end of the day, what could they really say? It's like I was a straight A student and it didn't give them any problems. So I don't see why it should ever really matter about your attendance as long as you're getting your work done. And thankfully my dad was super, super cool about it, where at first I felt the need to kind of, lie to him as well and say that I was sick and that's why I'm not in school. But over time I learned that not only he didn't care as long as I kept getting good grades, and that second of all, he kind of actually encouraged me, because he's the kind of person that's a self-made man. He never went to university. He became a farmer, right out of the gate, and took on a whole bunch of other, really challenging careers, and did a whole bunch of different things where he was basically self-taught, or just took different courses here and there for certain farm things. He was actually a really big inspiration to me to kind of blaze my own trail and to believe in myself and to not feel like going to university or schooling in general was the only way to go about having a successful career, and to really learn to have confidence in myself and to trust myself. So as I went from grades 7 to 12, the amount of days that I was missing just pretty much dramatically kept increasing, and I don't even know how many days I missed in grade 12, but it was probably like in the months. By the year's end, I think it was like every second or third day I was missing the whole day, or at least half the day. And I mean, thankfully, I got away with it and got so much else done while I was at home. And when I was done, I would just be watching Oprah, which was like my favorite thing ever. And my dad would come home and join me, and we just had like a great bonding time. And to be honest, I feel like I actually learned more from Oprah than I did my whole high school career. So there's that. The other big influencer in all of that was definitely me going to Tokyo at 15, where I had to miss a couple months of school and homeschool myself. That was actually super challenging, because that was going to school and working full time. So definitely was not easy, but it just totally blew my mind, that whole experience of what I thought was possible career-wise. I met so many amazing people that had their own businesses and had job titles that I had never heard of, and were doing so many different things at once. And it basically just proved to me that all these crazy ideas that I had going on in my mind were possible, that there were people out there doing this sort of thing. So by the time that I got back, to Canistino, to my small town, I was a changed person, and my confidence was just over the roof, because I now had, actual experience of what was possible if I set my mind to something. And there was pretty much no going back after that. I knew probably, in grade 10 that I wasn't going to go to university. It just wasn't for me. And the defining factor in a way was that the only career that I even considered when it came to university was being a psychiatrist. I think it was around like grade 8 or 9 where that was kind of the main thing that I thought that would really interest me. I was just fascinated by the human condition and still am, obviously. So I thought that that would be like the best job for me, and it paid a lot of money, and that's what I thought I would work towards. But when I found out that you had to actually become a doctor first and then specialize in psychiatry, where you could be in school up to 9 years, I said no thank you. Now I don't know how normal this is, so to say, but I just had so much anxiety when it came to having to be in school that, of course, I was still a generally anxious person about other things, but school was definitely one of the biggest triggers for me, where I felt so frustrated and really overthought so many different things. And even though I knew I wasn't likely to go to university, I was still really kind of, a bit of a maniac when it came to getting really good marks. And when it came to my final exams, like, I was nuts. Like, I would stay up all night studying and preparing and like worrying so much about what grade I was gonna get. And I don't know where that kind of mentality came from, because I really didn't have a lot of pressure from my parents like some people do. So I don't really know where that kind of perfectionism and drive kind of came from, especially when I knew that it was probably not going to matter so much for me. So school in general just brought me so much anxiety, and I just felt like I was being constantly judged, even though I probably wasn't. So yeah, in many ways, in that respect, it was just really not the best experience, and I'm still not sure if that's like common among young people. So now we're at the point of the story where graduation was looming, and I now had to tell my mom, who's Russian-Ukrainian background, that I was not going to university. And as you could probably guess if you know anything about Ukrainians and Russians, is that she did not take that well. In Ukraine and Russia, there's still a very strong mentality that you have to go to university no matter what. It's like, even if you do a career that's totally different than your degree, you still have to go to university to be a functioning player in society, and you're not really looked at as intelligent if you don't. She was honestly terrified for my livelihood and thought that I was going to just be homeless and just be a total disaster. So that was definitely, difficult to deal with, to say the least, and it definitely bothered me a lot the younger I was. Thankfully, over the past couple of years, we have really taken big strides in my mom being one of my greatest fans and really supporting what I do, and really seeing where I'm coming from now, and seeing that I'm not on the street and am actually happy doing what I love. So if you do have parents that don't support you 100% in what you want to do, know that it's probably coming from a good place, and try and not take it personally, because living your life for somebody else is really just going to slow you down long term, and you're probably going to end up turning around later. So if you can, try and just stay true to yourself from the get-go and do what you have to do, and your parents will likely come around in time. I had to move because the sun was shining a little bit too brightly on me. The other thing that I wanted to touch on is that people always talk about the struggle of following your dream, and that the chances of you achieving it are so small, and it's going to be so difficult, and it's going to be so painful. And that could very well all be true. My decade of pursuing my dreams has definitely been a roller coaster, to say the least, and there has been a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. But the thing that they don't talk about when they're making those kinds of statements is that they don't talk about how not following your dreams is like death, is one of the worst possible feelings in the world. In the last decade of pursuing all the different things I wanted to do, like modeling and acting and writing and photography and all these different things that I love to do, most of the time I did have to have a Joe job, so to say. Mainly it was always part-time, but there was a period where I was full-time at this one company just because I was trying to save up money. And initially I thought that it would actually be a position that suited me because it did have some of my initial interests in mind, but it ended up being one of the most soul-crushing experiences of my life, where I would basically cry every single night about how I didn't want to be there and what was I doing with my life. I was working so much more than even full-time. Like, they really pushed us so hard at that job to stay after hours and do all these extra things that I had absolutely no free time to pursue what it is I actually wanted to do. So everything I was doing pretty much came to a standstill. It was basically me just going to the job and then coming home and being so emotionally exhausted that I couldn't do anything else. And it actually reminded me so much of being in school because, once again, I was chained to this desk doing things I didn't give a fuck about and that I didn't feel that were actually serving a great purpose, if I'm completely honest. And it was just completely soul-crushing, where I felt like my true talent and my true innate gifts weren't being utilized and I wasn't making the most of my life. I feel like a lot should be said about that, how sure, following your dreams can be risky, nothing is guaranteed, nor is it with anything though. It's an absolutely horrible feeling to be going somewhere and just like praying, you know, the time go by faster and faster. Like, what kind of way is that to live your life, where you're just praying, you know, for the end of it all? Like, are you really looking forward to the day where you're like in a casket and are like, thank God it's over, that was so horrible? Like, is that the way you want to live your life? Is that the legacy that you want to leave? And I don't understand how people take their career choices so lightly when it's the majority of what you're going to be doing with your life. If you have the option, wouldn't you rather choose something that you can at the very least tolerate and then enjoy and then be passionate about? Wouldn't you want that for yourself instead of settling because you're too scared to actually do what it is you want to do? Once again, not totally raining on university. It's amazing for certain people. If you know what you want to do and university can help you do that, great, fantastic. But if you're not sure, maybe give yourself a couple years, you know, take the first couple of years off once you graduate high school and just work a regular job, or, you know, travel to some more inexpensive countries and just hang out there if you have the means to do so, and just give yourself some time to just get yourself together, to get to know yourself and to figure out what it is you actually want to do. One of the best things you could do if you already have a certain career in mind is to actually shadow somebody in that industry, or, you know, get any kind of position in that industry, so at least you kind of have a foot in the door, you get some experience, you kind of understand what you're going to be doing if you actually choose to pursue it. And then, if you still want to do it, then go spend the money to go to university. It's a very big investment for most people to go to university, not only with your money, but with your time. Like, think about what you could do in 4 years. 4 years is a very long time, and do you want to put that time towards something that you're kind of, sort of, I don't know, you know, feeling about? Or do you want to put it towards, you know, your own self-development? Take that time to just, you know, experience the world. Take that freedom while you have it, because as many people will tell you, like, once you have a family and kids, not that you have to do that either, but if you choose to do that, it's a lot harder to have that independence and selfishness. So if you have that right now, why not utilize it? Why not fucking enjoy yourself? Make the most of it. What is this huge rush to, like, get to university, get a family, get kids, and, you know, get to the casket as quickly as possible? Like, I don't understand the rush in all of that, unless that's for sure what you want and that's what makes you most happy, then fine. But I highly, highly, highly doubt that's the case for most people. At the end of the day, isn't that what life should be about? Actually enjoying yourself, feeling like you know, you have some kind of passion and purpose in the world, and, you know, seeing what life can bring you instead of creating your own suffering and dreading every single day. I just don't understand why so many of us put ourselves in that position, and myself included, because I haven't always been true to myself, not only in my career, but, you know, in my relationships and with just expressing myself. And thankfully, the older I've gotten, the more I give no fucks about what anybody else thinks, and I greatly encourage you to do the same. That's it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you got something out of it, and let me know if you resonated with anything I said, and just general sort of commentary about your thoughts on our educational system and kind of how it played a role in your life, and whether you pursued your dreams or not. I would love to hear all about it. But until then, I hope you guys are having a spectacular day. Keep being your own kind of beautiful, and I will see you soon. Bye, guys.